So that is going to be usable down there at the bottom, right below the panelist. It says chat. You can click on that, and you can actually type in your questions to me. I'll be moderating the chat box. That way, if folks have questions either before, during, or after a panelist talk, we can bring them up. Sometimes you have acronyms, meanings, things like this that happen, or maybe you just need some clarification. We'll also be having the live transcript turned on. That way, folks that need it, as far as any type of sensory needs or special medical concerns, you have that as well for accessibility. And before we go any further, I'll tell you a little bit about tonight's program. So tonight's program is related to medical devices from our historical sites. Tonight's program is part of the PHMC Collections Showcase program, and that's been going on since early, actually, in the early days of the pandemic, which I am happy, I think we all are, to say, back in the day when everything had first kind of started to light off. So we're pretty excited that we're now in 2022, but these virtual programs still have amazing reach to the communities that can't get to us physically or otherwise. So this is a wonderful outreach to us. During the program, all of our panelists will have 5 minutes to discuss their artifact and present it competition style. Although I am not Mr. Trebek, I will try hard to have some type of ill-placed humor sometimes, and we'll be able then to have a runoff through a poll. The poll will be opened at the very end, and all of you as attendees will be permitted to vote on your most favorite artifact that corresponds to the mission of the program, which is medical devices. During the program, you might hear about each of our sites, and if you'd like to learn more about these sites, you can go to the Pennsylvania Trails of History website or to phmc.gov, and you can learn about each one of our sites that are featured tonight and all of the other ones on the Pennsylvania Trails of History. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Mr. John Fielding from Anthracite Heritage Museum in Eckley's Miners Village.
Thank you, Tyler. Just going to try to share my screen here. That is not what I wanted. Can everybody see my presentation? Okay. Let's see. Can everybody see it now?
Yep.
Okay. It should be. Okay. So tonight I'm going to highlight our therapeutic pneumothorax machine known as AC 8611.304. Which is in the collection at Eckley Miners Village. It was used circa 1920 to treat advanced cases of tuberculosis at the Whitehaven Sanitarium. I'm just going to give you some background here about the Whitehaven Sanitarium and other diseases in the anthracite region. Respiratory illnesses were very common in the anthracite region. We have diseases like miner's asthma or miner's consumption. Today, they're known as black lung or anthracite. There were a variety of bronchial infections that historically were prevalent throughout the region, as well as tuberculosis. The 1865 Surgeon's Reports of Pennsylvania's 10th District describes some of the coal region diseases. He states, diseases of the coal region are principally those of the air passages, resulting from sudden changes in temperature, and are generally of an inflammatory character. Peculiar diseases are caused by working in bad air, producing a deprivation of the blood, causing debility of the whole nervous system, and thereby disordering the functions of respiration. Whitehaven Sanitarium, pictured here, we have the main building and infirmary at the Whitehaven Sanitarium. This is from a postcard photo that is not in our collection, by the way. But Whitehaven was built in 1901 near Whitehaven, Pennsylvania, in Luzerne County, and it housed tuberculosis patients. And between 1901 and 1941, over 25,000 tuberculosis patients were treated at Whitehaven Sanitarium. One of the doctors to treat those patients was Dr. Alexander Armstrong, pictured in the center of this photo. He's kind of looking at us, if you want to imagine that. So Dr. Alexander Armstrong was a prominent tuberculosis physician at Whitehaven Sanitarium from 1908 to 1932. For 4 years during that time span, he was also superintendent of the sanitarium, and he wrote numerous articles about the use of therapeutic pneumothorax to treat tuberculosis. So what is pneumothorax? Essentially, in layman's terms, it's a collapsed lung. We all have a lining between our rib cage and our lung. It's called the pleura. When air gets trapped in that pleural space between our lungs and the lining, it collapses our lungs. That is called pneumothorax. So why was pneumothorax used? Well, therapeutic pneumothorax was used to treat the most advanced cases of tuberculosis. Treat, not cure. So therefore it was therapeutic. So it was a treatment, not a cure for tuberculosis. Essentially what it is an artificial collapse of the lung by injecting nitrogen into the pleural cavity of the patient. This was supposed to encourage a period of lung rest, allowing the tuberculosis lesions within the patient's lung to heal. This method was first tested in Italy in 1894 and gained widespread use in the United States after 1910. By 1913, 50 patients at the Whitehaven Sanitarium had undergone therapeutic pneumothorax treatment, which was the main treatment for tuberculosis until the late 1940s, when antibiotics became available. So if you look at the image here, on the left, I have an image of our artifact in the collection. You can see it's kind of incomplete, but we do have an illustration on the right, which comes from a 1924 medical journal, showing a more complete illustration of a therapeutic pneumothorax machine. Essentially what it is, the machine has two glass cylinders. One cylinder is filled with water. In this case, the cylinder on the right is filled with water. The cylinder on the left would then be filled with nitrogen gas. The cylinder on the right would have a hose with a bulb attached to it. The cylinder on the left would have another hose with a hypodermic needle attached to it. The physician would attach or insert the hypodermic needle into the patient's pleural space through two ribs, so in the space between two ribs. He would then use the bulb to push air from the bulb into the first cylinder, which would cause a chain reaction, pushing the water into the second cylinder and then pushing the nitrogen through the hypodermic needle into the pleural cavity, collapsing the patient's lung. Anybody who's had a collapsed lung knows that this is a very painful procedure, not very comfortable, and the lung would be kept collapsed for up to 2 weeks. Some patients would receive a second dose every 2 weeks or after 2 weeks, and then repeated doses every 2 weeks therefore. Some patients could or would have to undergo these treatments for up to 2 years. So that's a very long time to allow the lung to rest. We do have some images here, some letters in our collection that deal with Alexander Armstrong and writing to other doctors about the success of one patient, as indicated on the left. And on the right, we do have him writing to another one about how he's releasing the patient to home rest because the therapeutic pneumothorax procedure on that patient did not take hold. It was essentially a failure. So despite some of the drawbacks to therapeutic pneumothorax treatments, they were actually sort of successful in treating the most severe cases of tuberculosis. And despite some limitations and repeated treatments, some patients were able to carry on a normal life, not solely confined to sanitariums. In 1946, the antibiotic streptomycin was developed, rendering the use of therapeutic pneumothorax and eventually sanitariums obsolete.
Thanks, John.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Excellent way to start us off with medical devices. Definitely Something you don't want to have is pneumothorax or tension pneumothorax with anything. And on that similar train of thought, we'll head over to the Pennsylvania Military Museum with Jennifer Eaton. And as she gets ready, I'll add in an anecdote about the tension pneumothorax. Our soldiers, sailors, and Marines now actually carry a decompression needle as part of their combat kits to help do that, because carrying the glass jars in the medicine is also pretty hard on the battlefield. So, Jen, over to you.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you, but your slides went away.
Let's try again.
Sounds good.
Sorry about that. Can you see my screen?
No, not yet.
How about now?
No. How about how about try logging back in?
How
Oh,
about now?
there we go. Now we're good.
Can you see me now?
Good to go.
Okay. So I'm going to talk about this prosthetic and leg brace you see here. Of course, war often necessitates a lot of medical advancements and development of technology, and treating grievous wounds is a lot of that. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about who these belong to. John Kelly of Huntington, Pennsylvania, enlisted in the National Guard on September 25th, 1940. At the outbreak of World War I, he rose to the rank of corporal and was assigned to the 2nd Battalion, 347th Infantry Regiment, 87th Infantry Division as a motor transport officer. For 21 months, he supervised the maintenance and repair of the battalion's motor vehicles and directed the training program for battalion drivers. In October 1944, he departed for Europe and served throughout the Ardennes and Rhineland campaigns. In February of 1945, 1 month after the Battle of the Bulge ended, Kelly was serving as the infantry company commander. And during that time, he was severely injured in Germany when a Jeep he was riding in drove over a landmine, damaging both of his legs. For his service and injuries, Kelly received the Purple Heart. He returned home and remained in the military. Over the course of 2 years, and despite more than a dozen operations, Kelly's right leg failed to heal properly. And in 1947, he made the difficult decision to have his right leg amputated below the knee, resulting in his discharge from the military. He wore a brace on his left leg and was fitted for an artificial leg, which he wore for the rest of his life. You can see them again here. The 2 prostheses in our collection, he was fitted for in 1970 during treatment at the Veterans Administration Hospital. By the end of World War II, nearly 17,000 soldiers had suffered injuries that required amputation. Unfortunately, prosthetic limb development hadn't changed much since the creation of the American Orthotic and Prosthetic Association in 1917. Following World War II, the US government provided funding for research and production of prosthetics with improved fit and functionality. The early heavy wooden limbs that soldiers were often fitted with began to be replaced by more modern examples like you see here. They were made of plastic, aluminum, and other composite materials. Such devices enabled civilians and veterans alike to have a much better quality of life, better mobility, and today you often see amputees participating in sports. It's no longer such a debilitating injury. That's all I've got.
Thanks, Jen.
Yep.
That was certainly a day when those came into the museum. It was quite something to see that in someone's trunk and then get the very emotional, evocative story. I was like, wow, what? Jen's like, hey, I got some legs. You have what? Like what coming in the museum? Like actual like body parts? That was quite
Yeah.
something that day. Thanks so much. We're going to go over to Old Economy Village with Sarah Buffington.
Thank you, Tyler. Can you see that okay?
Yep, good to go.
Okay. So I'm going to talk about Old Economy Village's skeletons, and they're not what you might think. We have a series of 8 full-scale lithographs of the human body, and this is how they used to be displayed before we took them down and conserved them. So what we have is different parts of the body. So this is the skeletal system. There's 2 of them. Another set that are the skeleton system with all the different parts. Like you can see all sorts of different bones from the body in this one. And then the skeletal and muscular systems. And then the muscular system here. So to tell you why we have these, this letter was written February 13th, 1813 from Dr. Johann Christoph Müller, who you see here. He said, "Dear Frederick," he was writing to the basically the co-leader of the Harmony Society who lived at Old Economy Village. He said, "As the father," who was George Rapp, the leader, "will write you himself next week, I think not. It is necessary to write you again. I only have to mention that, though it seems ugly to myself, and the more to you and to the father, I stand in great need of a skeleton. I had occasion for one last when Agner, Mason's wife, dislocated her foot. I would like to borrow one for 1 year if it could be got when I would give it back with the interest of $100. So Old Economy Village, if you don't know, was the home of a communal society. And Dr. Müller had to take care of a bunch of people, and he had to know how the human body worked. So this is him asking about wanting to have a skeleton. And I don't think that it ever happened, but we don't have any evidence of that. But Dr. Müller left in 1832. He left the society during a great schism when a third of the society left. But just after that, in 1835, you see this receipt in the collection. It says that Weber's Anatomical Atlas was purchased for $4.87. So I discovered that this is where those lithographs came from. You see on the upper right, Anatomisher Atlas. It's a menschlichen Körpers. It's the human body atlas. So inside of that, there was all these lithographs that could be put together. So here you also see on the left side, this piece is still in our collection. We don't have the atlas anymore. We just have the skeleton lithographs. But this is the description of what you see in all of the lithographs. So the man who put these lithographs together was Dr. M.J. Weber, who was Moritz Ignaz Weber. You see the difference in J and I. I think that's because they didn't have the letter J, or letter I, sorry, in the alphabet yet. I have not looked into that more, but Anyways, he lived 1795 to 1875. He was the son of a bookseller. He studied medicine at the University of Würzburg, receiving his doctorate in 1823. And he eventually taught in Bonn in Germany. And this was his master work. He did a lot of other publications too, but he was really learning a lot about the human body and putting that out there for people to see. So these are ones that we don't have. These show you how they were 4 pieces that were pieced together. These are nervous systems and circulatory systems. And now you can see how we have them displayed. They're in basically the reproduction of Dr. Mueller's office. So you can see on the left with the glare on it, that's one of the originals. And then when the museum was recreated around 2000, 2002 in there, they recreated all of these, and these are one piece. So on the right, you see the reproduced lithographs. And one more surprise, we got to use these lithographs in the film that's coming up next year. So I can't show you actors and everything, but I can show you that our lithographs were used in the medical scenes of this 1830 movie. So that's all I have.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah. It's like a life-size Grey's Anatomy.
Yes.
That's something else. I've seen those, and it's awesome. It's really cool. You got to see, if you have not been to Otakami Village for any other reason than perhaps sciences and art, that is a really cool exhibit to see, especially for the time period. So thanks so much. Josh Fox will go up to the Pennsylvania Lumber Museum. Josh, how's the weather up there? Are you finally out of winter time?
For today, we'll see what tomorrow brings.
Roger that, sir. You have the stage.
All right, thank you. Let me get my screen up. All right, so I am going to be talking about our museum's birch still. So on the side of the Pennsylvania Lumber Museum, we have a birch still that was built. So this was not a historic artifact, but something that was built to use as for demonstration purposes on our property. And to this still will take birch trees and through the distillation process produce birch oil. So the oil of black birch or sweet birch trees contains a high concentration of methyl salicylate. Birch oil is often referred to as spirits of wintergreen. Methyl salicylate is also found in the wintergreen shrubs, which is the lower picture, and that's what gives the wintergreen smell. So birch oil also smells very much like a wintergreen plant. And honestly, you could do the same process with these little wintergreen plants. You would just need a whole lot more of them than using the birch tree. So this oil is used for flavoring and medical purposes. Still in birch, as it was referred to, was a common practice for many woodsmen and farmers in north central Pennsylvania in the first half of the 20th century. So birch oil has several medicinal uses, which is why we're talking about it today. It has anti-inflammatory and pain relieving uses. Methyl salicylate has many of the same properties as aspirin, which is acetylsalicylate. I am no chemist, but those two words are the same, so obviously they have similar properties. And probably the most known medicinal use is birch oil, or is the anti-inflammatory properties. So you see in the picture Bengay, and again, it's talking about the wintergreen smell that Bengay or Iciha has. Methyl salicylate is one of the main active ingredients in that, and that's why it's good for kind of muscle pain relief. Other medical uses are, as you can see, they have Listerine, so it can be has some disinfectant properties. You find it in your mouthwash, or even just as a flavoring agent, as in with the toothpaste. Birch oil is also used as flavoring in food, although in very small amounts, because birch oil is pretty toxic. About 1 teaspoon is enough to kill a person, so don't drink pure birch oil. You can use birch extract as a more less toxic flavoring, but is used in such things such as wintergreen mints or wintergreen gum, or because we're in Pennsylvania, you birch beer, such as the Pennsylvania Dutch birch beer, and even tea berry. Again, guys, going back to the wintergreen plant and their berries, tea berry flavoring as well. And birch oil can also be used as a penetrating oil for rust remover. And one of the things that can be found in is in Marvel Mystery Oil. So it has, birch oil has many uses. And again, just today, focusing kind of more on the medical use, but one interesting thing going back to the wintergreens is that methyl salicylate is a fluorescent, and due to tribioluminescence, it's what causes those wintergreen lifesavers to spark. If you crunch them in the dark, if you ever notice that phenomenon where the lifesavers spark when you crush them, that's due to the properties that you can find in birch oil. So here's kind of a diagram of birch still. It's similar to any other kind of still. You have a firebox at the bottom. Above that, there would be a pan where you would have your water source. Birch stills were always built near a fresh water source. And then the box would be loaded with birch, mainly cuttings, branches, saplings are preferable because the oil is in the bark, not the wood. So you want more bark per wood ratio. So you get that with the smaller cuttings and saplings, but then you could, and then once that heats up, the steam with the oil in it then gets filtered through the condensing coils to fresh cold water and comes out at the end, and usually is collected in a jar. So some buckets that are still in action. You see the cuttings and smaller logs of birch loaded in our still. The one cord capacity still, which can produce about a quart of birch oil over a 48-hour run. Stoking the fire in the firebox, and then the end product where the birch and oil and water comes out. The oil is heavier than water, so it will sink to the bottom of this jar, and then the rest of the water will overflow and can go back into the box to be recycled again and go through again. Now this cloudy water got the name and known as low wine. Not quite sure why, but as the wine part kind of hints at, it was seen as a little bit of a refreshing drink. It was not uncommon for the birch distillers and other woodsmen to pass by to just dip a ladle in the low wine and take a refreshing drink. But the one account we do have tells of a family member who dipped their ladle a little too deep and must have gotten some of the birch oil because they were dead by the next morning. So again, don't drink birch oil. Now, the quote I found that I thought kind of puts a good summary of birch activity, birch distilling. So birch oil distillation is a unique, though minor forestry industry in which the operator is able to convert a raw material into a saleable manufactured product without the aid of middlemen. And that's a quote from the Journal of Forestry, June 1940. And that's part of why it was popular in this area. It was something that woodsmen or farmers could do as a way to make a little extra money themselves. They didn't need to deal with the sawmills or any of the local big lumber companies. They could go into the woods, collect their birch that still wouldn't cost that much to get up and running. And it's their own little industry that they could do. And they were common in PA forests in the first half of the 20th century, and oftentimes operated by farmers in the winter off season, something that they could do when it was too cold to grow crops. And the birch tree, part of why it took until the 20th century is that they were found in second growth forests. So once the hemlock and white pine had been logged out and clear cut, the birch trees were one of the first things to come back. And again, because you don't want big mature trees anyway, this was a good activity to be used in previously logged over forests. And the price of birch oil, this wasn't, said most people, a lot of times this was kind of a second income. There was a few people that did have it as their primary income. And the price could vary about $1 a pound around 1900 to $10 to $15 a pound during World War I. Procter & Gamble were said to pay $99 for a gallon jug, about a week's worth of production during the Depression, which would be about those World War I prices, the same, about 10 to 15 a pound. And then but by 1940, the price was back down to $2.75. And that Journal of Forestry article notes that by this time, the methyl salicylate was being synthetically manufactured. So that really cut into the profits of these woodsmen who were out doing it just the old-fashioned way of collecting the birch. It was much cheaper and faster to actually make it in the lab. Now this drawing shows kind of what a typical still scene might be like. It's the Byron family still outside of Liberty, Pennsylvania during the 1930s, drawn by one of the descendants. And so setup, this could be something that would be pretty typical. So if you're operating a still, you generally have a minimum of 2 people, but if you had a family, the whole family could come out and help. And they had a little shack that they built. If you're running the still, it needs pretty much almost 24-hour attention. Someone always needs to be maintaining the fire. Someone needs to be out collecting the wood and doing other activities. So they would just kind of move to where the still was and temporarily live there for a while.
Excellent.
And some historic photographs, just real quick, from the Butler family still. You can see some still, this was around Latonia, Pennsylvania, which is a kind of a lumber ghost town these days. It's not really a Latonia left. But after the mills had moved out by the 1940s, the Butler family was operating some birch stills around. So you can see some of the stills. And again, the shack where they were living. And the Butler family operated stills from 1942 to 1972. So by 1966, they were one of the last still engaged in regular birch stilling. And so this is some photos from a newspaper article that talked about them again, because they were one of the last ones. You can see by that point, they had 2 stills running. So they had a good production going on. In the photograph, we have Ellen Butler, who is the son of the men and one of the men in the previous photos. So kind of second generation stiller, showing off some run from the day's mill. He was able to get a lot more than we get from our still. And so the Butlers of Llewellyn were known as probably one of the last active birch stillers in the area. So our birch still was constructed in 2011, and it was the brainchild of former forester Sam Cook, whose house happens to be a museum board member, and Grant Kavanaugh, who was the son of a still operator and remembered his childhood of helping to operate the stills. And some pictures of our dedication, and we have a picture with Skip and Llewellyn Butler. So Llewellyn was involved in kind of the design process of our still, and actually parts of the last still that he operated from the 70s was used in the construction of our still. So the lid of our still was his lid as well. So there is a continuation of that tradition in our still.
Oh, it's wonderful.
And so we operate our still. If you want to see it running, we fire it up generally 3 times a year. One was a couple weeks ago in our spring show in April. The next time will be our Bark Peelers Festival, July 4th weekend. And then again, the fall show in October. And if you want to own some results, we sell all natural birch oil in our gift shop made with oil made from our birch still.
Excellent. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you.
Definitely have to get up there and grab some, and maybe some birch beer along the way as I go through Coudersport. So as we get down toward the other end of the state now, we'll be hearing from the Railroad Museum of Pennsylvania from Dodie Robbins. So Dodie, what do you have for medical devices from the railroad?
Well, let me share my screen. There we go. And so today, I'm going to start out by stating the obvious. Railroads can be very dangerous. You have large, heavy equipment moving around much smaller, more delicate human beings, relatively speaking. So there are bound to be accidents. So this is why medicine, medical treatment, and the need for doctors is an aspect of the railroad industry that has always been around, but not always talked about. In fact, railway surgery, as it was called, was its own discipline in the 19th and early 20th centuries, as railroads required doctors to treat injured employees as well as passengers and other third parties, give physical examinations to employees, and deal with medical claims. The development of Johnson & Johnson's first first aid kits in 1888 was inspired by the need for emergency medical care at railroad construction sites as the railroads expanded across the country. But as safety regulations and procedures improved, the need for separate railway medicine discipline decreased. However, doctors and first aid were still important to the railroads. So there are multiple items in our collection that relate to today's topic. And so I had to narrow it down. And today I'm going to talk about one specific railroad doctor and his collection of medical tools that were donated to the Railroad Museum of Pennsylvania a few years ago. His name was Dr. Harvey Winfield Klein, and he was a Philadelphia-based physician hired by the Pennsylvania Railroad as a doctor on overnight passenger trains to assist with any medical issues of passengers and crew that arose during the trip. So if a passenger gets sick or an employee has an accident, a doctor was already on board to treat and care for the patient, whether it was a minor illness or a major medical emergency. Dr. Klein graduated medical school in 1912 and was hired by the Pennsylvania Railroad in 1922. He retired from the railroad in 1944, but continued to practice medicine well into his retirement. So this photo includes Dr. Klein's collection of tools and instruments. And this collection includes 2 travel kits and some individual tools that would be easy to travel with. The individual tools include a reflex hammer, bandage and surgical scissors, forceps, a tuning fork to test hearing, a magnifying glass, a catheter, a syringe, and a box that once held a tester for urine sugar. And 2 of the items I want to highlight from this group are designed for being on the go. This first item is a magnifying loop. It's a small plastic case with 2 lenses that fold inside when not in use. So when closed, this only measures 2 inches by 1.5 inches, so it could easily fit in a pocket. And a very handy tool to have for a quick close-up look at a patient or a specimen. So this next tool It took me a while to figure out. At first, I thought it was just a handle for something. But as I inspected it more closely, I realized the ends of this tool unscrewed. So when I pulled it out, pulled the ends off, it turns out that inside this handle were the extensions that could screw onto the end of this handle. And doing research, I found out this is actually an ophthalmology tool, specifically a foreign body spud and needle. So on the, what's this side? The left, the spud end is wide and flat and is used for superficial material in the eye. And the needle end is triangular and comes to a point. And this was used for deeper materials. So just imagine these tools coming towards your eye. One of the things I've noticed with other first aid materials that are part of our collection is that there are a lot of eye treatments. So getting something in your eye must have been a common occurrence for railroad employees, and it's probably also why goggles were a common railroad accessory. In addition, Dr. Klein's collection also includes 2 travel toolkits. Both are leather cases, which contain an assortment of medical instruments. The one I have pictured here is the smaller one, and the leather is in pretty fair condition. The other kit, the leather is just completely falling apart and fragile. The case, when closed, measures about 6 inches long by 3 inches wide, and is about 1.5 inches thick, so it could easily fit into a large pocket and be carried around. So inside, the tools are held in place by leather loops, and there are actually 2 layers of tools in this kit. The top layer folds out to reveal the bottom tools. So in the first set of tools includes a tweezer, also called forceps. There are 2 scalpels and another tool which looks similar to the one end of foreign body spud tool for the eyes. And the other end has a spoon-like end, I don't know, for scooping something. One of the scalpels has a straight blade and the other has a curved blade. And if you'll notice, both of these scalpels are reusable. Many modern scalpels use replaceable single-use blades on reusable handles. And when you go into the second layer of this kit, it includes a pair of surgical scissors and a pair of forceps. So all these tools could be useful in the event an emergency procedure was required while on the train. And while you would hope it wouldn't be needed, it was a good kit to have just in case. So as you can see from Dr. Klein's collection, having tools and toolkits that could easily fit in your pocket or in a small travel bag was essential for a railroad doctor assigned to passengers trains who had to be prepared for any emergency that might occur during a trip. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Dodie. I have a vision of Dr. Klein, much like a fire extinguisher being hung in that glass box that says break in case of emergency. And all of a sudden, like Dr. Klein like jumps out and he's like, he's on it, you know, with his toolkit. But that's excellent. So for a quick recap for everybody, we had John Fielding talking about a pneumothorax, therapeutic pneumothorax device. We had Jen from the Pennsylvania Military Museum talking about prosthetic legs due to a road mine accident being encountered by the driver of the vehicle and the rider of the vehicle, of course, being the wearer of these prosthetics. Sarah Buffington with the late century Gray's Anatomy version of lithographs of the body and of medical device. Josh with the birch still, which I do need to somehow figure out a way to get up there or an excuse to get up there and try some of that at some point. And Dodie with a break in case of emergency, Dr. Klein tool bag and kit, which is both amazing and terrifying of trying to do if it's scooping for earwax or doing anything with a foreign body in your eye on a train while it's bumping and moving. He would not only have to have steady hands, but so would the patient's nerves. So bless them. I'm going to open up the polling for everybody now. I'm going to launch this poll and it'll go live for you. We'll let it up for a few minutes. And while folks are filling out the poll, what you're thinking of course, is the medical device that was used for tonight's presentation and how it ties in to the theme. And while you're thinking of that, in the chat box, you'll notice that one of our colleagues listed PA Trails of History websites that you can actually go and find out more about all of these wonderful sites that we have featured tonight and some of our other sites as well. It's patrailsofhistory.com. And I know we're going into our big programming season, so be sure to check out all of our websites for our updated programs, because I know as we go into summertime, not only will the school groups start to pick up with our day camps and summer camps, but so too do our amazing programs, both inside and outside. So far, it looks like the Railroad Museum is slowly winning, but not quite pulling ahead. Got a few more folks coming in. Make sure their votes get tallied up. So before I announce the winner, I will let folks know that while this was recorded, we'll be able to post it to the PHMC YouTube channel. For those of you, your friends or family that were not able to attend this evening, so you can see a recording of it. And then a few of us also post it on our Facebook page. That way you can see it there as well. So tonight's winner is not going to be the Pennsylvania Military Museum. We did not win with our prosthetic limbs, although we came close. The winner is actually the Railroad Museum of Pennsylvania with Dr. Klein. So Dr. Klein's Tools and Tool Bags. So you are the winner. And the folks joining us from home may wonder, okay, what does that entitle you to? Well, it entitles you to the reward for good work is more work in some ways, which means you get to host the next one of these events and you get the coveted belt and title belt that I think is unfortunately still hidden in Josh Fox's or Josh Roth's office at Pennsylvania Lumber Museum. So I think we need to do a search
I
and
want that belt.
yeah, we
I
need
want the belt.
we need to do a search and
Don't-
recovery for that.
Don't come at me.
Well, excellent. Well, be sure to go through the chat box and you can look at some of our other events going on. Our next showcase is going to be on June 9th at 7 p.m. And that one is going to be the theme of sets of artifacts. So perhaps Dr. Klein could do a 2.0, being a set of artifacts. But we'll see about that. So it's June 9th, 7 p.m. Look for that on our Facebook pages, as well as then on the PA Trails of History websites. And Amy Fox has actually posted the link in the chat box so that everybody can click the link and make sure you sign up. So with that, thank you, panelists. You guys did an amazing job. And thank you so much for joining us, all of the attendees. And we look forward to hosting another one. And Dodie, I guess you're on the list now to host. So make sure you tell Pat Morrison that that to-do list just got one thing longer.
I just did.
Good. Excellent. Well, congratulations. Congratulations, Dodie. See you, everybody.